We look through franchise disclosure documents. We really scour every information source that we can find. As you can imagine, January through March is a very hectic time for our team. We're on the phone constantly, emailing operators all day, and looking through just piles of public documentation to make sure that our reporting is as accurate as possible. It feels awesome to be able to work on such a cornerstone product for both our company and the industry as a whole. The top 500 actually accounts for over $300 billion in restaurant chain sales. So that's a huge part of the industry that we can provide our customers with a lot of visibility into that they just wouldn't get otherwise.
And customer success, Uber Eats, Pat Wu.
Hello, everyone. My name is Pat Wu, Head of Sales and Customer Success at Uber Eats. I'm excited to introduce you to our Technomic keynote speakers today. In just a few moments, you'll be hearing from Joe Pollock, Managing Director of Technomic, and Pat Noon, Vice President of Business Development for Technomic. Staying true to the Technomic mission, these two food and research industry veterans are going to discuss trends that shape the landscape of the restaurant world and what we can look forward to seeing in this ever-changing space. At Uber Eats, we are constantly thinking about how we can use data in order to adapt and address the needs of restaurants, partners, and consumers. It's the idea of using the data of today to shape the industry of tomorrow. Joe and Pat are going to take us through how Technomic has observed best-in-class operators adopting this mentality and using predictive technology to not just react to trends, but to anticipate them in order to be on the cutting edge of industry-level changes. Thank you all for being here today. Now I'd like to welcome back Winsight CEO Mike Wood.
Thank you, Pat and Uber Eats. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this keynote session of this year's National Restaurant Association show, Winning at the Restaurant Business, Insights from the Top 500. If you were at Super Session a few hours ago, you already know who I am. If not, welcome, and I'm happy to welcome you back for the second time, but if you're new, I'm Mike Wood, CEO of Winsight. Winsight is a company dedicated to educating, connecting, and inspiring professionals in the food and beverage and allied retail industries through research, media, and events. Our brands include Restaurant Business Magazine, Technomic, and as of last year, we're the proud producer of the National Restaurant Association show. I'm thrilled for you to join us here today. This session is an exciting one for me. The Technomic Top 500 is one of Winsight's most important intelligence tools for operator and supplier alike. It takes us many hours to compile and analyze sales and other growth data from virtually every chain in the business. From that massive pool of information, we're able to rank the top 500 chains in the US. But it's much more than a list. With expertise from our Technomic team and a database extending back 40 years, the report brings to light a host of insights and intelligence. Financial trends, pricing strategies, segment and concept analysis, exploration of newcomers, up-and-comers, and long-time leaders. All of this makes the top 500 the industry's most robust analysis of the chain restaurant industry. To share some of the findings, we have two of Technomic's most experienced experts taking the stage, Joe Pollack and Pat Noon. Thank you again, Uber Eats, for your support of this session. Joe and Pat.
Mike.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. There we go. Thank you very much. Before we get started with our formal presentation, Pat and I would like to take you through a trip through memory lane and kind of take us through the last 40 years of the restaurant industry. So if we can please run the video.
Time to make the donuts.
Where's the beef? Call Domino's Pizza and avoid the noise. $7.98 at Little Caesars. Pizza. Outback Steakhouse. No rules, just right. Yo quiero Taco Bell. Howdy, America. You notice something different about me? Exactly. A new briefcase.
$65 billion, huh?
Wow.
Yeah.
65 billion all the way to 556 right now.
Yeah. And then I think if you ever want to spend a little time for about an hour, our marketing team had a great time looking at commercials from the 80s and 90s from restaurants. So if you ever want to, waste an hour, find an hour of time, you'll get to see all the creativity, all the fun commercials out there. The Sponge Monkey from Quiznos, the great one there. We see Sizzler had one back in the 90s as well. A lot of great stuff. But.
Yeah. And also notice Yo Quiero Taco Bell. Remember the Chihuahua? 1997, I bought my first Chihuahua in 2001, so kind of inspired me. But anyways, let's talk a little bit about what's been going on. Just a very brief introduction about Technomic. We've been doing this since 1966. Our company, very focused on the food service industry, where we provide insights, research, advisory services, looking at the industry, menu trends, not only in the United States, but also in 25 international countries, and we've been looking at the top chains within the U.S. since 1974. So that's, again, looking at 44 years. So today what we want to do is kind of take you through what we call our top 500 report. And again, We're going to be looking at 2018, what has happened, and also what we're seeing going forward. We're going to look at some of the trends and the dynamics that are driving the industry, and then also peek at the outlook for restaurants for 2019. So first of all, let's look at some of the common themes with this year's Top 500. The performance improves for the industry giants. So if you look at those chains that are 1 through 25, the giant chains among our Top 500 list, 18 of those 25 showed growth in 2018. In aggregate, they grew at about a 4% rate, and those 25 grew $7.3 billion in sales, or added another 700 units to their total conglomeration. Also, third-party delivery. We're hearing a lot about third-party delivery. What's driving delivery? A lot of it's these third-party players that are allowing just about any operator to get into this space. Many chains are getting involved in it as well. Many of the top 500 partnerships are making headlines, whether it's Uber Eats and McDonald's, Yum and Grubhub. Just about every major chain has at least one partnership. And today, third-party delivery in the food service industry is about a $10 billion business and continues to grow very aggressively.
And then we have the adult beverage factor. And don't worry, we're not talking about the weekend here during the restaurant show. We're talking about what's happening from a restaurant perspective and what we're seeing. As we've seen a shift to more delivery and more off-premise, it's becoming more about the experience, getting people into the restaurants. A number of casual dining chains that are doing well are experimenting more with their bar menu, their cocktails, their beer, wine, and spirits. Some of the growing players that we see in casual dining, such as Twin Peaks or Miller's, Ale House, Brass Tap, all focusing on the beer environment. But then we're also seeing other companies like Cooper's Hawk, going on that wine experience. So as we're seeing a bit more of an off-premise trend going on, how do you get people in the stores? And one of the great things about an experience, experiential, is through that adult beverage platform. Also, I'm sure everybody has seen this, but the plant-based food items on menus, 54% over the last 5 years is what it has grown on operator menus in the top 500. It's 54%. So this isn't necessarily just a fad. This is a trend that's staying on. And why are people using it? It's not just vegans and vegetarians. We're also looking at meat eaters looking for something different. We're looking at people maybe looking for more sustainable items as well. With Impossible Foods as well as Beyond Meat, we're seeing a number of operators in the top 500 introducing on their menu, from White Castle to Burger King to Tim Hortons, more recently, as well as the many casual dining players. And not just with the Beyond Meats as well as Impossible Food type offerings, but we're also seeing noodles and companies with their zucchini noodles. It's just something different, something that customers can try that they can't necessarily always do at home, and also just looking for something different than what they're usually used to.
Entertainment. Entertainment's flourishing. What is entertainment? Entertainment. It's basically merging entertainment and food service. So I'll give you some examples. Think about people like Topgolf. Many of those of you may be familiar with them, where they provide you an opportunity to try your golf swing, but also provide you food and beverages in a very relaxing type environment. What we've learned, and we've done a lot of research with consumers, that 70% of consumers prefer to visit a entertainment venue versus a typical casual dining restaurants for group occasions. So when they get together with groups, they want to be doing something, and entertainment is meeting that need. We're seeing all types of new type of concepts below the top 500 that are starting to creep up on that top 1,000 list. People like Punch Bowl Social, other places that not only offer golf, but put things like archery within an entertainment environment, escape rooms, and even axe throwing are things and activities that are being merged with food service and restaurants. Fast casual. Fast casual has been a darling of the industry for the past 15, 20 years, where we've seen tremendous growth. Despite still leading all segments of the industry, we're starting to see a slowdown happening there. There seems to be somewhat of a maturation happening. Previously, we've seen double-digit growths happening here, and now we're starting to see high single-digit growth numbers. And again, as this segment becomes bigger, it just becomes more and more difficult to start seeing those very strong, aggressive growth rates on a percentage basis.
And then as I talked about plant-based proteins, don't worry. Traditional proteins are also very important. We're seeing the chicken category, especially within the limited service. And limited service is quick service as well as fast casual restaurants, seeing tremendous growth within the top 500, 8% right now. We'll cover it a little bit more in detail. But companies like Chick-fil-A, with continued expansion opportunities across the states, doing phenomenal. And you think about it, they're only open 6 days a week, and they're growing at phenomenal rates that we'll cover a bit later on. Wingstop as well, Raising Cane's. If you look at their menu, very simplified, chicken tenders that you can just get and try something different, try something new, but also try something that's very traditional in nature. So it's not just plant-based. We're also seeing great growth within the chicken category. And then in addition, the number one thing one of the top few things when we're talking to operators about driving traffic, within the industry today. It's on the top of everybody's minds. How do we get more people in our seats? And then when we get them in the seats, how do we get them to spend more and come back? We're seeing more deals out there, more LTOs being offered, which we'll go into a bit more later on what we're seeing from that perspective. We're seeing bundling offers. We're seeing more use of technology to drive demand. And if you think of this as we're seeing traffic being challenged, what else is going on within the industry that's also it's creating a perfect storm is the labor environment. With labor being more challenged and the unemployment rates at relatively all-time lows, restaurants are having a harder time of retaining employees. And if you think about, they're having a hard time retaining employees, the training, the service, the back-of-house expertise, all goes away, which can contribute to perhaps traffic being down and people not coming back in the stores. So as restaurant operators out there, we're seeing more incentives based on, retaining, employees, retaining the traffic, as well. So again, a lot going on within the industry, and we're going to switch more into the numbers section next. So we talked about how big, if you were watching the video, how big the restaurant industry, $556 billion in sales, and that's just restaurants. So put in perspective, when you look at total food service, in total food service, we'll look at dining out occasions at college universities, at hospitals, at healthcare facilities. We're talking 900 billion in sales. So, and you put it in even more perspective, there's over 700,000 restaurant locations. If you talk about total food service locations, that's 1.4. So consumers have never had more choice. And it's paramount, as an industry, we're looking at how we attract them to the restaurants, what you're doing in your stores to drive traffic in, because we have supermarkets, we have convenience stores, we have healthcare facilities, we have senior living, all competing for that share of stomach.
Okay, let's look at some history of our industry. Again, going back to 1978. I'm going to kind of look at these in decades. And, we start in 1978, so let's think about 78, 79, and 90. 78, 79, and 80. Those were high inflation years, okay? So you see that big number up there. A lot of that's due to inflation. The U.S. economy had high inflation overall. We also saw the same in food service, so that's why we saw some big numbers. But in the 80s, think about the 80s. The industry grew on average 8.5% in a relatively low inflation environment. This is when the industry very much developed. Demographics were changing. More women were going back to work. There was less time to cook at home. So what was benefiting was the food service industry. In the 90s, we saw growth as well. A lot of that growth in the 90s was driven by full-service restaurant chains, where they were developing and showing strong growth numbers, where if you looked at, for middle America, they could go to a full-service restaurant chain and get great value and great value from products, great quality, and going out for a Tuesday or Wednesday night for a sit-down dinner became almost a norm. And then when you talk about like the 2000s, those were years, even with the down years of 2008 and 2009, that was really the development of fast casual. So fast casual came out within that decade, and that was, again, buoying up our industry. And then when we're looking at the teens where we are now, we're kind of seeing some more maturation. Yes, fast casual is doing well. but still, that's starting to mature a bit. Full services, again, we're seeing maturation there. So again, we're kind of in more of a maturation environment today on an overall basis. So if we look at the restaurant industry, the top 500 chains represent 57% share of the total restaurant industry. And then chains 501 through all the way down to the smallest independent out there represents 43% or $238 billion. So chain number one on our list is McDonald's, $38 billion in U.S. sales. And just to keep you grounded here, we're talking about U.S. only. And then at number 500 is Roti Mediterranean Grill at $49.2 million. So you see a pretty big disparity there between 1 and 500 on our list. Now, looking at chain performance year over year, now this is sales growth numbers. You see over the past year in 2018 versus 2017, limited service, or excuse me, the top 500 chains grew at about $10 billion. Over the past 4 years, going back to 2014, up $44 billion. And in compound annual growth rate basis, 3.8%. So, but if you look at those numbers there on the bottom, this annual change, you see we had a pretty significant drop-off between 2015 and 2016 in terms of growth. And then 2017, we also saw a downward growth number. But now we've kind of come up a bit, not dramatically for 2018, but still 3.3% among the top 500 chains. Traffic is certainly a big issue here. We're not getting as many butts in the seats as we've had in the past. There's a number of issues that are driving this. Some of it's demographic. Some of it is we're seeing more consumers gravitating towards independents and smaller chains that are not captured by the top 500. And then locations. If we look at the number of locations captured by the top 500 chains, 1,500 more of those versus 2017. And over the past 4 years, development of 12,600 more units overall. And you can kind of see there slowly declining or decelerating growth down to 0.7% last year versus 2.2% in 2014. So again, that's telling us that we're starting to see saturation here, and many chains are slowing down their growth trajectory relative to adding units. There's really been a much more focus on growing sales within existing units because of a number of reasons. It's more efficient, and also that's, if you're a public company, that's what Wall Street looks at to help value your organization. So if you look at, there's two numbers we're showing you here. The one that's in black is the 1-year growth rate, and the one that's in gray is the 5-year compound annual growth rate, or the average growth rate over the past 5 years. You can see just for about every segment except mid-scale full-service restaurants. So you got fast casual, we've got fine dining, we have got quick service, mid-scale and casual dining. The difference between mid-scale full service and casual dining is mid-scale is typically breakfast-oriented. If they have alcohol, it's beer and wine only. Casual dining typically has a full bar. And you can see there, for all segments except mid-scale, that 1-year growth number is lower than it is for the average 5 years. So there's been a slowing of growth among the top 500 chains that fit into each of those. And then you can see there on a total basis, 3.3% growth for 1 year, 3.8% on an overall basis. So again, slowing of growth of the top 500 over the past several years. So what are the top 5 limited service chains? And what we mean by limited service here, maybe I should explain myself, we're basically talking about quick service and fast casual. Limited service is, think about pay before you eat. That's the easiest way of thinking about it. I know there's service systems where you pay for it, it may be delivered to your table, but it's pay before you eat. It's a government definition. It includes quick service, fast casual. And you see here, top 5 limited service chains. In fact, these are the top 5 largest chains overall. You've got McDonald's at number 1, $38.5 billion, grew 2.4% last year. You've got Starbucks at 19.7, Subway at 10.4, down 3.6%, Taco Bell at 10.4 billion, and Chick-fil-A at 10.2. Couple things to keep in mind here. If you look at it, I think a pretty interesting dynamic. McDonald's is twice as big as Starbucks, And then Starbucks is almost twice as big as Subway, Taco Bell, and Chick-fil-A. So there is some real delineation between the number 1 and number 2, and then the number 2 and 3, 4, and 5. However, if you look at number 5 on there, Chick-fil-A, growing at 13.5%. This year, they displaced Burger King as the number 5 chain on the list. And if all trends continue, they will be the number 3 chain at the end of 2019 on this list. Now, think about 10 or 15 years ago, some of us in the North may have never even heard of Chick-fil-A. You know, very much a Southern phenomenon chain in the South that many consumers didn't hear about. So again, this is a new chain that's growing tremendously, focused on the number 1 thing that they do very well is service. It's service excellence. They still haven't entered a lot of markets, so there's still a lot of runway for them to grow. So when we look at limited service overall, the top 500 grew at 3.9%, and there's a number of different segments here. And the ones that have grown above that 3.9% are things such as Asian Noodle. Asian Noodle, 9%. What fits into there is Panda Express. It's the biggest player there, the most dominant player. They're the ones that are driving that segment overall. Then you've got chicken. And Pat already alluded to chicken growing very strongly. That's up 8% last year, where you've got Chick-fil-A. Again, you just saw 13.5%, but then you also see these fast casual chicken tender players like Wingstop and Raising Cane's showing double-digit growth. Coffee cafes, that's very strongly Starbucks oriented, up 7% last year. You've got the Mexican category with Chipotle and Taco Bell being the 2 big players. Chipotle up 9% last year. And then specialty, which is where you see a lot of innovation happening. And whenever we look at the top 500, specialty is typically one of our faster growing segments because that's where we see a new menu category start emerging. In this case, we're seeing a lot more in terms of Mediterranean driving a lot of that growth.
Great. And as Joe covered off on limited service, I'm going to take a look at what's going on from a full service perspective. So as we've mentioned, I think a few times, full service covers casual dining as well as mid-scale players. Looking at the top 5, we have the bookends here. If you think about Applebee's and IHOP, they're both owned by Dine Brands. Applebee's seeing a momentum from last year with some of their drink offerings, as I mentioned earlier with the adult beverage factor, trying to drive traffic through their LTOs, through their dollar margaritas, as well as some of their other dollar deals that they've had, but really focusing more on the bar and seeing some much better results that we've seen from them over the last 5 to 10 years. On the other side of that bookend, IHOP. We can all, I think, remember to last summer when IHOP created the media craze around the changing of their name, to something else, and it was the IHOP burger. It drew great craze, great media attention. Also, really drove into that breakfast day part, which, as Joe mentioned earlier, is capturing a lot of good trends. From going back up top, going to the Olive Garden, so Darden concept here, growing at 3.7%. And really, when you look at Olive Garden, you think about they do everything, they're foundationally doing everything well. The service style, the food quality, the beverage quality, really trying to drive that home, that authentic Italian occasion. Consumers continue to reward them. They're a perennial grower, and growing at $4.1 billion. Now, when we move over to Buffalo Wild Wings, they were once the top grower within this category, growing at 20% a year. They've fallen on some struggling times over the last few years. We actually saw them negative this year, but very bullish on them. When you start to look at Inspire Brands, who also owns Arby's, and what they have been able to do with Arby's over the last few years, kind of bring them back through the Meats campaign and otherwise, we're seeing some changes within Buffalo Wild Wings, going back to their basics, going back to the TVs, going back to more of the wings, the beer, really creating that more even adult atmosphere. And take a look at some of the prototypes that they put out on the market as well. So really trying to hit on trends as well. They're going after that esports segment, the guys that play video games, for a bunch of money, and really trying to capture that, but making it a more personalized event. So again, very bullish on watching Buffalo Wild Wings over the next few years. And Chili's has struggled with some of that sea of sameness out there, but they're also focusing on the bar. They're also looking at menu simplification, focusing on burgers as well. So trying to come back up top, but that's what we're seeing from a full service perspective. And when we start to look at the full category like we did in limited service, we saw it only grow at 1.4%. Factor out inflation, we're kind of looking negative, right now when we start to look at the full service growth. But within each category, what is important to remember, there's winners. And it's similar to how we laid it out below, the ones up top are over that 1.4%. We have family style, growing at 2.3%. The people in that category, I mentioned already, IHOP as well as Denny's. And then you have some up-and-comers like First Watch, some of the AM eateries out there that are seeing some strong breakfast growth overall. Then we start to look at Asian growing at 2.6%. And, we have P.F. Chang's as well as Benihana up top, but a lot of the growth is coming from some of those more emerging players. Some of the Korean barbecue players like Gayukaku, or the ramen bars like Jinya, Little Sheep. Then we move over to steak, growing at 4.5%. So as we see the economy, doing well, people with more disposable income, they're willing to spend more on what at least is perceived quality. And within that category, we're seeing a number of double-digit results. Texas Roadhouse growing at a double-digit clip, relatively large-sized chain. We're also seeing companies like Capital Grill, Texas de Brazil, all growing at double digits overall. So, as you think about, we talked about deals and LTOs and some other things, some of these restaurants that are doing well are really much more of a premium type offering. And then finally, in the Mexican category, we saw them slightly above the 1.4% average at 1.8%. A couple of the players driving that growth is Chuy's, based out of the South, as well as Uncle Julio's. Much driven by unit growth. We want to watch those two players overall as they continue to grow, that they maintain their sales levels with the unit growth expansion that they're doing. And like I said, even below the line, there's winners in every category. I talked about the Italian pizza category already with looking at what's happening from an Olive Garden perspective, but with the pizza guys, we see Giordano's as well as the Anthony Coldfire Pizza both popping up well. Sports bars, where I said Buffalo Wild Wings was having some troubles. Twin Peaks, Miller's, both growing at nice single high digits, overall. And then the seafood category overall, if you look at this category, it's very challenged. Joe's Crab Shack had a number of closings last year. We see a number of players down, but another Darden concept, Eddie V's, more of an upscale environment, growing at double digits overall. So within every category, even where you see struggles, there's players that are winning and finding ways to attract that consumer. Now, when we look at the growth chains to watch, I'm going to start off with over 200 million in sales. So put it in perspective, 200 million in sales would be about the top 150 players and above. So we're seeing a number of different themes throughout this. We'll start off with looking at full service restaurants. So 30%, three of the top 10 players over 200 are full service restaurants. We have First Watch, which I mentioned briefly before. They're growing through acquisition as well as organic growth. They've acquired a number of other breakfast-focused concepts. AM Eater, like I said, kind of 7 to 3 hours, limited shifts. But they're growing through, again, both organic growth as well as acquisitions. Then we have Blackbird Diner also growing at 16%. They focus on breakfast all day. And then we look at Cooper's Hawk, as I mentioned earlier, a wine concept. Based out of here in Chicago, seeing some tremendous growth at 17%. What's neat about their experience is you can go in, do some wine tasting, you can enjoy their wine of the club. So not only do they have experience within their store, you can also bring it home with you as well. And I think when you start to look at the full service category, what it tells me, if you don't have booze, you better have breakfast if you want to continue to grow that environment. And you have breakfast and booze, it's the epitome of success. So now, when we go into the limited, more chains with over 200 million in sales, that's the rest. That's 7 of the top 10 growth chains over 200 million. And look at this for a second. It's burgers, pizza, chicken, and sandwiches. So as much as we're looking at innovation a lot, consumers are always looking for also something better. Another thing to watch on here too is we're not just talking about, I said fast casual. There are no players that are quick service restaurants. Over 200 million growing at these type of clips. So again, consumers are looking, the key thing, what they're looking for is premiumization, which all these brands cover overall. Whether you're talking about the hand sliced meats from Jersey Mike's, and think about Jersey Mike's, 17%, they're a top 40 chain. right now. So they're growing tremendously. Then you have Raising Cane's, a $1 billion chain, growing at 22% with chicken fingers. But they're doing it right. They're appealing to the consumer. They have a lot of room for growth as well. And again, you have the better burger category, Shake Shack and Habit Grill, really executing on a variety of items. And again, the pizza guys, the made-to-order pizza. Pizza continues to grow. Consumers love pizza. They get to customize, try something that they can't get at home. So again, overall, when you start to look at these growth players in the environment that we're in today, concentrating on experience, concentrating on the right ingredients, concentrating on premiumization is proven to be winners for them.
Okay, let's talk about chains that are under 200 million. And again, we're looking at chains that are 150 and below. You kind of see here, a number of different segments overall. These are kind of the up-and-comers, the ones that, we need to watch. These are the ones we typically look at to see where there is innovation from a menu standpoint, service standpoint, or a concept experience standpoint. So if you look at this list, actually I said 150 and below, but this particular list, the fastest growing, starts at 113 million, which is Mission Barbecue on this list, down to 49 million, which is 110 Grill. The fastest growing is Core Life Eatery, $53 million in annual sales last year, 49 units, promoting grains and greens and better-for-you ingredients. So they talk about having no antibiotic chicken, no preservatives, no high fructose corn syrup being used. They're primarily seen in the upper Midwest in Ohio and Pennsylvania. Just talking a little bit about those that are more full-service oriented. You got 110 Grill, Metro Diner, Walk-Ons, Jinya Ramen Bar, and Kura Sushi. 110 Grill, $49 million in sales. Modern American culinary is their positioning. They're also noted as a top 10 allergen-free restaurant in the United States. So they're very much, again, their positioning is that they really work with their consumer and the patron and let them know that they have certain items that are allergen-free. Walk-ons, 57%. How many people here are New Orleans Saints fans? Few? How about Drew Brees fans? Just a couple? All right. Anyways.
We got one person, I think.
Okay. All right. That's all right. He actually has an ownership position. He's a partner in this chain. $102 million, casual dining chain, primarily in the Southeast, started in New Orleans area. And then when you look at Jinya Ramen Bar and Kura Sushi, they're benefiting from Americans' desire for more authentic Asian cuisine. So you see their growth rates at 40% and 39% respectively. And then when we look at some other chains on this list, you see Halal Guys as an example. Halal Guys, $59 million in sales. Their positioning is American halal foods. And again, they're growing very aggressively, as you can see there, at a 57% rate. And another one that I'll point out here is Chicken Salad Chick, $110 million in annual sales. And the salads are named after the founders' friends and family, and who inspire her to design specific salads. So she's got a salad as an example called Nutty Nana. Okay, must be after the grandmother in the family. Jalapeno Holly and Olivia's Old South. And again, this is, taking that fresh orientation that consumers are looking for, salad orientation, and you can see that growth rate, 44% off of a base of 110 in 2018. Now, to kind of point out some other chains that we're watching that are below our top 500, again, a lot of innovation that happens below the major chains. One that we want to point out is the Simple Greek, grew 64% last year. It's a $35 million chain, 28 units. It's ranked 664, but given that 49 million this past year was our threshold to be in the top 500, it could very easily rise up to being a top 500 in 2019. So it's one we're watching. Their focus is build your own Greek bowls and pita. They're kind of in the fast casual specialty arena. So again, the buy before you eat category of limited service, check average of 1040. One thing about them, it was inspired by the CNBC show The Prophet. Some of you may be familiar with that. and by Marcus Lemonis, who is the star of that show. So just to tell you a little bit about who they are, they're East Coast based today. Another one to bring up is Maple Street Biscuit Company, 59% growth last year, $45 million in annual sales with 30 units. Sandwiches on flaky biscuits, mac and cheese, sweet potato fries, another one that, again, is right at the cusp of hitting our top 500, given with $45 million in sales and 30 units, very easily can hit our top 500 in 2019. Their key tenets are craft food with a modern twist, gracious service, immaculately, not just clean, but immaculately clean restaurants, and a sustainable business, being very sustainable in terms of their approach. So again, another restaurant that we're watching very closely on the fast casual side. Pat?
All right, how many are ready for the Woodstock revival this year, the 50-year reunion? Anybody go? Nobody's a Breeze fan or New Orleans fan, so I've tried the Woodstock. Anybody? No. Well, don't worry, look no further. We have Flower Child, coming in at 52% growth this year. And really what Flower Child is focused on, health-focused concept wraps, kind of taking that hippie-type environment as well when you go into the stores. Everybody's kind of dressed up. It's, some of the best-looking hippies that you'll ever see probably, overall. But we have $13.10, number 697, fast casual chain. They're closing in on 20 units. They're a Fox restaurant group as well. So North Italia, some other brands that you might have heard of over the years, based out of Arizona. So seeing them, churn a little bit more and looking at as these players as a high growth player. Another thing to watch about this, the Cheesecake Factory actually has made an investment in them as well. So looking at potentially with an option to buy. So looking at potentially trying to grow this outside, would bring it in under the Cheesecake Factory umbrella. That's again just an investment right now, but again another reason for to watch them. And then when we start to look at I talked about the seafood category a bit before, struggling within the casual dining perspective, but we're starting to see some more players in the seafood category from a fast casual perspective. Slapfish growing at over 50%. They're a California-based chain focusing on fishes tacos, clam chowder, burger sandwiches, high check average as you can see there. They describe themselves as a modern seafood shack. So again, really nice environment, plated well, and they're announcing rapid expansion across the East Coast. So expecting to see them continue to grow, trying to hit on that health halo. Again, a different alternative type protein than what we traditionally see within the fast casual or QSR environment outside of the burger and chicken category. So definitely one to watch here. So we're going to switch gears here and talk a bit more about the 5 types of LTO. So at Technomic, we've been tracking LTOs, forever, pretty much, because we see it as a potential driver, overall, and understanding, how operators are really looking to get customers into seats. And we see, from over the last 5 years, within the top 500, LTOs have grown 64%. So based on that, we also do a lot of concept testing. So interviewing consumers on the appeal, their intent to purchase, and really what's driving them to potentially come in. So the big question as you're looking over the next slide or so as operators in the room is we've outlined 5 types of LTOs that we're seeing in the marketplace. And the question is, what goals do you have, when you're trying to drive your LTO business? Is it to appeal to a mass audience? Is it to, try and create a buzz? We're going to talk a little bit further about what we're seeing from an LTO perspective as you go back to your operations. How can that work in your environment? So first, we'll talk about the novelty, item. So a novelty item, it's high uniqueness, high uniqueness perception, potential to drive buzz. The gold standard in this category is the unicorn frappuccino that Starbucks did back a few years ago. It has a relatively low repeat trial, so really trying to create that buzz, trying to get people interested. It typically has very limited availability. We saw KFC, recently do one of these with the pickled fried chicken sandwich. So they use pickle juice. They took their traditional chicken sandwich, put it in pickle juice, and introduced this item. What they said was, and what we're seeing with a lot of these is, they said they're going to have it till it's gone. So again, customers that wanted to try it, it wasn't, a 2-week offer, a month offer. We're going to have it on the menu for 3 months. We're going to have it till we're out of the product. So again, it's something. Now I heard they might be bringing it back, but that's besides the point. So seeing success here is trying to again create that buzz. Taco Bell does a great job at this as well. So then we look at the diet-centric niche items. So if we think about the diet spectrum over the last 30 years, and when you start to think about diet, 10, 20 years ago, you would think about weight management, type offerings. So maybe low calorie, low fat, low carb. That's still around, but when we're looking at LTOs, what we're really trying to see, what we're seeing more of is those seeking, better for you, type ingredients or alternatives. So in this case, a dairy alternative, we're looking at the iced coconut milk mocha macchiato. That's very hard to say. I never ordered it, so it's very hard to say on stage, as well. So, but again, diet-centric, not necessarily focused on losing weight or low carbs or anything else, more focused on perhaps your lifestyle. And that's appealing, again, more to a niche audience. It's not going to have mass appeal necessarily. It's going to appeal more to a niche audience. Then we look at the flavor-centric items, so niche items. So again, this is one where you look at it from a very flavorful, a lot of combinations, a lot of mashups. Mashups have been a big, exciting part of the industry over the last few years. You take something, you put it with something else, everybody gets excited about it. And there's seasonal flavors and otherwise. And I mean, who could resist a ground beef, egg, ketchup, tomato, cheese? Maybe iced tea next to it. But IHOP introduced this item. And again, it's not meant to drive everybody into the, not meant to drive that purchase overall. It's meant to create more of that buzz. What I think it should come with the disclaimer, you better not have anything else planned for the rest of the day after having this. But it's still, it's something to try. And then we have broad appeal. So this gets into more of that high purchase intent. So this is something you take one of your items that's great on the menu and introduce something new. Forms of popular food, mainstream type items. So what do you add to something when you want to make it even a broader appeal? Anybody have ideas? Bacon. So the Big Mac turned into the Grand Mac with some bacon overall. Another item that we see in this area that adds some of that differentiation is avocado. So those are two items when you get one of your core type items, you throw something like bacon and avocado in, you're going to have a hit, and it's going to appeal to a wide audience. And then we look at a best in class as well. So this is just high purchase intent plus high levels of excitement. So this is kind of where you want to be to reach that mass audience. Very approachable in creativity as well. So this is a Sonic offering here. It's all white meat chicken dunked in a bold sauce, basically. So not too far outside out their brand, zone of creativity, but something that they can do, they can execute on, something that their consumers can accept as well. So I went through this relatively fast. We have some great webinars at Technomic around LTOs and LTO strategy. You can come to us afterwards, and we can talk to you a little bit more, but also introduce you to some of our teams. But the big thing, again, the big takeaway is, what is your strategy? Whether you're a manufacturer in the room or the operator in the room, what are you trying to do when you put that LTO on the menu? We've identified hopefully some ways as you're looking for that continued growth opportunities. Joe, back to you.
Yeah. All right. Also, big trend. Obviously, tech and delivery, not only 2018, 2019, and definitely in the future, and they very much are intertwined as well. So what's kind of driving demand? Let's first talk about delivery. First of all, this whole cycle of reliance on food service, this has been a trend for a long time. Consumers are just, too busy. They need food away from home. It's a convenience factor. They're busier than ever, and on many occasions, many of us just don't even have time today to even go through a drive-through to pick up food. So going home and getting delivery, very easy for us. And with many other services today, consumers are willing to pay for that convenience, and the same thing is translating into food service. Also, the whole busy lifestyles, the willingness to pay and ability to pay for this convenience, very important from a food service perspective. We're seeing, consumers just willing to do it, and it's being encroached in our mindsets and how we live our lives. Tech aiding food everywhere and anytime mentality, thinking about Amazon, when we're going on Amazon and buying items, for our needs or whether we need it or not in some cases, that's translating into restaurant foods as well. You know, we can sit on our couch and say, you know what, I'm hungry. Instead of getting off your couch, going to a restaurant, we can do this through seamless applications on our phones today. And then I also like to say there's this Netflix effect. Consumers no longer have to go out to be entertained. You know, they have busy lives, and we today like to sit at home sometimes. And more we want to just say, hey, you know what, we want to stay away from the whole rigmarole of life outside our four walls. So what we're finding is consumers now, we've got streaming services. We can stream and watch whatever we want through Netflix. And what's a great thing to do, you can get Netflix and have somebody bring the food to you, without even getting off your couch. Maybe you got to get off your couch to open the door for you. But again, this is just this whole lifestyle change that we're seeing overall, and delivery is really meeting that need of consumers wanting food brought to them in a very convenient fashion while also being entertained at home. More brands are joining the third-party party. Again, if you look at just about every player out there, they're increasing their share of the business. You know, high percentage of leading operators are getting into the delivery game. Major change, just about everyone are involved with at least one of these players. And just to kind of show you some data that we get from a transaction basis, you can see here in March of this year, which is our latest data, third-party delivery, $1.1 billion in that month alone, which is up 45% from March of 2018. And again, if you look at 2018 on a total basis, third-party delivery represented $10 billion in sales. And, you know, with a trajectory of about 45% growth, this is continuing to grow on an exponential basis. Pat?
Yeah, so I mean, if you've been throughout the show and you're keeping your finger on the pulse, off-premise is impacting everything these days from an operations standpoint. You know, from a packaging, when you start to look at your packaging, do you have the right packaging that's going to carry your items, you know, out there, whether it's through delivery or curbside or takeaway overall? Investing in the right packaging, making sure that your brand stays consistent and has as good as possible experience through that environment. A menu offering. So evaluating what type of menus, what type of items that you want on your menu when you're looking at off-premise and delivery. Do you offer, you know, your fried items? Do you offer certain items that you just know won't carry? It's decisions that have to be made. Sometimes consumers want it no matter what. So again, it's a tough internal struggles, but one that we're having consistently with operators these days. And then also looking from a new store design perspective. You know, as we see it shifting, you know, right now, more off-premise occasions, are your stores designed the right way? Do you have a separate interest potentially for delivery drivers? Is your front of house shrunk a little bit more? Do you have two lines in the back of the house where you can do your different items? But as you're looking at, you know, the design of the kitchens and what's happening from a store perspective, make sure that you're putting these in considerations, because we continue to expect to see off-premise overall, not just delivery, but off-premise overall, whether it's curbside, takeaway, you know, continue to be part of the factor and part of the growth within the industry, and understanding how your operations, you know, can leverage this the most. And when we talk about tech, if those that were in the session before, you know, what I consider the leader, you know, in the industry is Domino's was speaking about what they were doing from a technology perspective. You know, a lot of people say they're a technology company that serves pizza, and we're seeing other operators definitely, you know, up their game in these categories as well. One of the most recent ones is McDonald's, and you know, when you look at McDonald's, they serve 68 million customers every day. I mean, that's incredible, you know, when you start to look at it from that perspective, and that's globally. So we're seeing the convergence of technology and restaurants intersect. Convenience for the consumer through apps, through ordering systems, and metrics for restaurants. So how do I get more from the customers? How do I learn more about the customers? They invested into dynamic yield, which is a decision technology over my head, but basically it can tell you if, you know, the weather, what type of weather is out there, what the traffic was like that day, offer up different type of menu items based on what people are purchasing almost in an instant. They experimented with it last year. It did so well that they decided to buy the company. So that tells you something there, that they saw some nice increases in sales overall. Another company on that top of the list when you start to think about looking at the technology aspect of food service is Starbucks. With their app and loyalty program, they've been leading the industry, in many ways, and getting that. And it put Starbucks a bit in perspective too, as they have more mobile users than Apple Pay as well as Google Pay. So they have a lot of customer data in there that they can utilize and understand how their customers are, where their customers are at, and hope continue to hopefully serve up items for you. They've also invested $100 million into Valor Sirens, which is invested in food and technology. You might have heard of some of the other companies they invest in, called Tesla, as well as SpaceX and otherwise. So again, this is one to watch. Starbucks is one of the leaders right now within the technology category, and they're continuing to make more investments to help them make better decisions on how to make the customer experience even better. And then Dunkin', another leader within the app and loyalty program category, really looking at how their technology can really drive that off-premise occasion. I already mentioned a few times, but curbside delivery, giving them more access to the consumer to help them make more flexible decisions. Again, another great app to utilize or to take a look at if you haven't taken a look at, and how they're utilizing it and how they're going to continue to expand on that to make it even more easier for the customers to interact. So Joe, where do we go from here?
All right, let's first talk about competition is only going to intensify, and what's going to really drive that is tech and delivery, as I talked about a little bit before. Tech appears to be the new battleground. Operators are trying to use tech as a differentiator. Front of house for consumer interface and revenue enhancement, back of house for efficiency. But our point of view at Technomic is that those that embrace technology, both from a front of house or back of house perspective, need to keep in mind the consumer. Even if it's back of house for convenience, for efficiency's sake, you need to think about what the direct impact is for the consumer. And if it does have a positive direct impact for the consumer, you want to continue to move forward on that. If it doesn't, it probably doesn't make sense. So think about those investments. Delivery, certainly strong growth and strong prospects. However, keep in mind, delivery still is not perfected overall. Think about things like fried foods. Keeping those products with the food integrity or the product integrity that consumers expect when they go to your restaurants. And also, keeping those hot foods warm through delivery. Think about also delivery time. Sometimes they're pretty long. So again, there's still a lot of imperfections in the system that need to be worked out. So again, those are two things that we're kind of looking at as it relates to tech and delivery. There's going to be a lot of operators looking to differentiate on both of those components.
All right, and new players will encroach into the old guard space. So put this a little bit differently. As Joe mentioned earlier, 18 of the top 25 players grew in sales this year. But what we're seeing is, as the top players continue to grow, consumers' lifestyles are changing. There's 700,000 restaurants. There's 1.4 million food service locations. There's choice, out there. So it's not just about what the top players are doing, but what are emerging brands doing? What are supermarkets doing? What are convenience stores doing? All impacting the space. And then if you go even further, you go into the delivery platform. So if you take those 700,000 locations, that just made it that much easier for you to be able to execute, against some of the bigger guys, within the industry. So we're seeing a more level playing field potentially coming out there as consumers shift to more off-premise occasions. There's opportunities for, the independents and small chains to continue to hit that mark. But then the share of stomach from a supermarket's convenience store perspective is, creating more and more challenges, for restaurants overall.
Okay, despite economic conditions being very favorable, we just had a favorable economic report with gross domestic product. Last year was a strong year. Economists have revised kind of their forecast that we're going to have a pretty solid year given what's happening with the overarching dynamics of our economy. The food service industry, we're not seeing really robust growth. We're seeing growth in the 3% range, and if you take out inflation, we're pretty flat, and then we're looking at traffic, which is declining. There are a lot of dynamics that we have to look at. First of all, if we look at some of the numbers, the 35 to 54-year-old population is smaller than it was just 10 years ago, and this is the peak years for food service spending. Actually, it's 7 points lower than it was 10 years ago. So that's a major, major issue. Again, that'll ramp up in the next probably 5 or 6 years when the Gen Zers kind of get into that age group and it'll start repopulating a bit. But right now that we're kind of in a lull relative to that population of that group. 62% of millennials, again, those in that 30 to 42-year-old age group right now, are living paycheck to paycheck. Again, they started a little bit behind the 8 ball because they couldn't get jobs right out of the Great Recession. So again, they don't have that savings built up. They're still paying off student loans in many cases. So again, that is less discretionary money they have in their pockets to go out and spend. So again, and also there's more and more money for discretionary spending that they have. They're buying subscriptions now on a monthly basis, taken right out of their credit card for, Netflix, for Hulu, for whatever else that they're buying online, Amazon Prime, all those different types of things. That's competing for dollars for restaurants. So again, that's why we're seeing more modest growth in our industry. Pat?
All right. And we're on the last slide with 1 minute left. So if we did one thing right, we kept everything on time. And before we let you go, we appreciate you all taking the time to come listen to us for the last hour or so. The slides will be available. I saw a number of people taking pictures, but it will be available as well afterwards if anybody has any questions. We have a booth 6003. Come get a visit for us. And again, thanks to Uber Eats. Great partner of the show for sponsoring the event. But when we start to look at 2019 sales, so this is looking at total industry sales, so not top 500 anymore. This is looking at all restaurants. We're seeing the restaurant industry coming at 4%, just a little bit above what we had seen from last year. Fast casual coming at 7.8% overall. Fine dining 5.5%. So we're seeing some nice growth rates within these more premium or at least perceived premium type offerings. And then with the rest of the markers coming at 4.4% to 3.5%. 4% with casual dining, quick service at 3.5%, mid-scale at 3.5%. So again, no matter where you sit within the landscape, there's winners and losers within every category. Understanding what the trends are, what the opportunities are within your environment is going to help you, continue to grow within the restaurant world. So with that, I think that's it. 3, 2, 1. I think we're done.
Thank you very much.
I've been reading books of old, the legends and the myths, a kid